Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. Before we get started with our next interview, I want to thank Rebecca Cotto da Silva for Skyping in from Bolzano, Italy, giving the latest updates on what's been going on in Italy in that country's effort to stem the coronavirus. And she has always got great insights, although her awareness of Italian soccer today was quite limited. The rest of the schedule today is we're going to go talk to Kevin Folan, the head of school in Providence Country Day, in just 1 second at 12 noon. Former Director of Health for the state of Rhode Island, Dr. Michael Fine, will join us as always. And then at 1 o'clock, Governor Raimondo will be doing her press briefing. We'll be carrying that live on GoLocal as well. Let's go to Kevin Folan. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me this morning, Josh.
Okay, so you take over a little over a year ago at Providence Country Day, one of the best known prep schools in Rhode Island, a rich history, lots of famous graduates, and your first year as head of school, you have a global pandemic. How was that to deal with your first year as head of school?
Well, it's been quite a year for sure, Josh. If we had spoken last July, I had a full head of hair and was excited for that first year at PCD. But I think despite the many challenges, it's also been a wonderful year, and I am grateful to be part of such a welcoming, and as we saw these last couple months, patient community.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I like to say in the last 100 days, the entire world became digital. They had to learn how to do a Zoom. They had to learn how to learn, teach, transfer information in entirely different ways. Let's go to your school year. You're cooking along in early March. Some rumors are coming from around the world. The first case of coronavirus hits Rhode Island on March 1st. What happened after that?
Sure. So I will say that feels like it was about 5 years ago, even though it was, 3.5, 4 months ago.
Right.
So it has been quite a spring trimester for us. So I think we were fortunate in that we are part of the National Association of Independent Schools. And so even though coronavirus did not come to Rhode Island until March 1, particularly out on the West Coast, a lot of our peers had been just sharing a lot of information about what they were experiencing. And so my leadership team and I, we had been meeting really since about the middle of January, preparing for a number of different scenarios. And we had actually put out our first communication to our families in early February. And I think I was kind of vacillating between is this overkill, or should we just err on the side of being communicative? And I'm glad that we did, because by the time coronavirus did hit here in the Ocean State, we felt like we had a fairly good plan to roll out to our families. And I'll also say that our school calendar was on our side, because when Governor Raimondo announced on March 13th that the public schools would be hitting the pause button, closing for a week, that was actually going into our 2-week spring break. So we really had an opportunity to take a deep breath, make sure that our teachers were set for when we got back from break.
So you go on pause, you don't know how long it's going to take. How did I'll start with the faculty. How did the faculty embrace moving towards an online teaching strategy?
I would say, Josh, it ran the gamut. I mean, at PCD, we have 2 teachers who have been at the school since 1978. We've also got some teachers who were there just a couple years out of college. And those folks, of course, are digital natives, where the pivot to Zoom was relatively seamless for them. And for people who have been at the school for 42 years, it wasn't quite as seamless. We'll just put it that way. I will say, though, they jumped into it. They were curious. We have an incredible director of IT, Justin King, and he was making some house calls. He was making himself available at all times throughout the day to make sure that all of our teachers were feeling confident with the jump to distance learning.
How did the students do? Talk about them. Obviously, listen, they've been playing digitally since virtually the time they were born. They're texting morning, noon, and night. They know every app inside and out. But it's different from playing video games or TikToking to learning AP history.
Very true. I think so many of us have learned these last several months just how resilient and resourceful our students are. And I think that's certainly true at PCD. I remember on our first virtual town hall on March 25th, I didn't know how to operate one of the functions on Zoom. And one of my students, Charlie, said, "Oh, Mr. Folan, this is what you do." And so even though he wasn't in the office with me, he was still giving me some pointers. And I think it kind of evened the playing field for us, where even though it's our job to teach our students, they were also teaching us quite a bit. So I would say overall, the students responded very, very well. I will say by early May, there was some Zoom and just kind of distance learning fatigue that had set in. And I think everyone was grateful, the students in particular, that that was kind of the home stretch. And our final day of class was on June 5th.
That's great. You've got an open house coming up this week. It's a virtual open house before you head back in the fall. Talk a little bit about what folks who are interested in finding out more about Providence Country Day will experience in this open house.
Sure. So I think my team and I, we were trying to figure out, is this a good thing to have or not? Because I think we have heard a variety of different feedback on how distance learning has gone for students. Some families have experienced a great experience, and some feel like the last couple months have been really, really trying. And so we really just wanted to position us as a resource for families who are grappling with, do we make a shift? Or we also just want to share, here are some of our best practices that we think would serve students and families well, regardless of if you come to Providence Country Day School or you stay in your current environment. And I will say what's really happened these last several months is whether you're an independent school, parochial school, public school, or you've been a virtual school all along, there's just been a ton of camaraderie and the sharing of best practices. So I feel really fortunate there has just been a community for those of us who are trying to figure out how to run these schools, because there's no playbook for how to do this. I can't call up a mentor and say, "Hey, Josh, back in 1918 during the Spanish flu, how did you navigate this?"
Yeah,
So it really has.
The most popular people are people from University of Phoenix, right? They're the ones
That's right.
who have the deepest experience in online learning. We hear the same thing at Brown University and across the board of the complexities of shifting almost overnight. There was not a lot of game planning ahead of time. Beyond the open house, it looks like there's going to be a major effort across the board to resume classes in the classroom with restrictions. The governor's said her hope is that on August 31st, public schools across the state will return to the classroom. All the details are not clear and will roll out over the next couple months. What's the plan at Providence Country Day for the fall?
So we are still fleshing that out. As you indicated, we have been watching and in touch with Governor Raimondo and her team. On June 10th, she boldly said that we were going to be open on August 31st, which we were pleased with. And then just this past Friday, she came out with the state guidelines. And so we've actually got a reentry task force meeting tomorrow morning. This is, I think, the third or fourth time that we've met in the last couple of weeks, just to make sure that we are prepared for a number of different scenarios. Of course, we're all hoping that we are going to be back on campus in person doing school live. But I think we're seeing states throughout the country where they're experiencing, whether we want to call it a full-blown second wave or not, but we're seeing a spike in some cases. And so even though we want to build out for a campus reentry come August or September, we also want to prepare for virtual learning, or we want to prepare for some sort of blended model where there might be some students and faculty on campus. There might be some students and faculty who are still off-site.
Certainly it looks like, I won't speak for Providence Country Day, but the game plan here in Rhode Island from the public school is to be in the classroom, but also aware that it could shift at almost any time. We have Dr. Michael Fine on every day at noon. He's the former Rhode Island Director of Health. He says, hey, listen, the early fall may not be the issue. It's much later in the year. He says flu season historically hits hard in Rhode Island in January and February. So schools, public and private and universities, are going to need to be flexible throughout this first year of trying to return, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that flexibility, being nimble, and communicating with our families is so important. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had as this community's leader is just managing uncertainty and anxiety. And frankly, just trying to be transparent and say, hey, Josh, we are trying to figure this out right alongside you. One of the things we implemented this spring was that every Friday we would pivot between sending out a survey to gather feedback on, hey, what's going well, where can we improve, and then having a town hall so that we could really echo back to our students and families in real time. This is what you're telling us. Here's how we're making adjustments. And I think that has to be part of our plan moving forward for the fall and the winter.
Well, what was the best surprise? What was the best part of it that you never thought you'd anticipate or learn of how the entire process has gone?
The best surprise, I would say two things. One, my team did a great job of keeping some of our tried and true traditions alive and well, even though they looked very different. Whether that's still having Grandparents' Day, having Field Day, or we even had an on campus commencement. Of course, folks were in their cars listening on FM transmitters, but we were still able to have some of these seminal milestone moments for our students, which was really, really great. And I would say the second thing is we're always eager to get speakers, particularly alumni, re-engage with the school. And we have a number of alumni spread out throughout the country and frankly throughout the world. And I think what Zoom and just these digital platforms have provided for us is we're no longer thinking just about people in our own backyard, but trying to get folks who live in Florida, who live in California, who live in Egypt to share what's going on in their lives with their friends back in East Providence. So I think those have been two really great surprises.
Listen, I had the pleasure of working for a PCD former student, John Chafee, Governor and U.S. Senator, father of Governor and Senator Lincoln Chafee. So he did well. And then he went off, I think, for PG or a couple of years at Deerfield Academy. But that PCD education seemed to serve him pretty well, as he had about as grand a career as one could have. You get the last word, Kevin. What do people need to know about Providence Country Day, this upcoming open house, and the fall?
What do they need to know about Providence Country Day School? So first off, we are not the only ones working hard and coming up with some great plans for the fall. I hope that I can be a resource for families trying to figure out what do I do with my son or daughter to make sure that their education continue to move forward. And I would also just say, reach out to your schools, reach out to the administration, really create a partnership, because we are trying to figure this out alongside you. And I would just say for PCD, we're almost 100 years old. We were started in 1923 during this progressive era of education where we believe in educating the whole child. Academics, the arts, athletics, and of course, setting them up with some great options in college. So please check us out.
Kevin Folan, head of school at Providence Country Day, nearly 100 years old is the institution, well known across the community here. I want to thank you for joining us. For everyone else, Dr. Michael Fine at 12 noon, Governor Raimondo at 1 o'clock. Everyone, please stay safe.